There's a certain type of man. When something breaks, he doesn't panic. He doesn't search for answers. He doesn't call anyone. He just stands there, staring at the problem, and something shifts in his face. Not frustration, not confusion. Something quieter. Something focused. And if you've ever seen it, you know exactly what I'm talking about. But what most people don't understand is that moment has nothing to do with the thing that's broken. Because what you're seeing in that moment isn't just someone fixing a problem. It's a completely different way of thinking, one that most people never develop. By the end of this video, you'll understand why men who know how to fix things don't just act differently. They see the world differently, trust themselves differently, and handle pressure in a way that sets them apart from everyone else. What most people miss is that this way of thinking isn't something you learn from watching videos or reading instructions. It's built in moments where nothing works, where the problem refuses to cooperate, where there's no clear answer and no one to ask. That's where the shift begins. Because when a man chooses to stay with a problem instead of walking away from it, his brain starts adapting. He stops looking for quick solutions and starts building understanding. He pays attention differently. He notices patterns. He starts connecting cause and effect in real time, not in theory, but through direct interaction. Most men go through life outsourcing friction. Something breaks, they find someone to fix it. Something feels complicated, they avoid it or look for the fastest explanation. And there's nothing inherently wrong with that. But the ones who don't, the ones who stay, are training something deeper. They're training their ability to think under pressure, to hold multiple variables in their mind at once, to tolerate uncertainty without shutting down. And over time, that repetition rewires how they approach everything. Problems stop feeling like interruptions and start feeling like something they're meant to engage with. And after enough time in that environment, something even deeper starts to develop. The way they understand problems changes completely. It's no longer just logical. It becomes physical. They don't just analyze what's wrong. They feel it. A sound that's slightly off. A vibration that shouldn't be there. Resistance where there should be none. Small signals that most people would ignore start to stand out immediately. And when you ask them how they knew something was wrong, they pause for a second and say, "I don't know. It just felt off." But that's not guesswork. That's pattern recognition built through repetition. It's knowledge that doesn't exist in words. It lives in experience, in their hands, in their senses, in the thousands of small corrections they've made over time. Researchers call this embodied cognition. The idea that understanding isn't just something that happens in the mind, but something shaped by the body interacting with the world. And this is where the real difference shows up. Because these men aren't just thinking about problems. They're directly connected to them. At some point, this stops being just a skill and becomes a philosophy. Because most people are trained to read difficulty as a signal to stop. If something feels hard, confusing, or frustrating, the instinct is to step back, to avoid it, or to hand it off to someone else. But these men interpret that signal differently. To them, difficulty isn't a warning, it's an invitation. It means there's something here to figure out, something just beyond their current understanding. And instead of pulling away, they lean in, they slow down, they start breaking the problem apart, piece by piece, without needing immediate answers. From the outside, it can look like stubbornness, like they're refusing to let go. But internally, it's something else entirely. It's a belief that if they stay with the problem long enough, it will give way. And that belief changes how they experience frustration. It doesn't overwhelm them the same way. It becomes part of the process, not a reason to quit. Over time, this builds a quiet resilience, not loud, not performative, just a steady refusal to retreat when things stop being easy. Over time, this way of learning creates something else. A subtle shift in who they trust. Because when you've spent enough time solving real problems, you start to notice something most people don't. The instructions don't always work. The manual doesn't account for real conditions, and the expert isn't always right. And when you're the one standing there with the problem in front of you, none of that matters. The only thing that matters is what actually works. So instead of relying on what they've been told, these men begin to rely on what they've seen, what they've tested, what they've corrected with their own hands. Their confidence doesn't come from information, it comes from verification. From the outside, this can look like they're resistant to authority, like they don't want to listen. But that's not what's happening. They've just learned through experience that truth isn't always something you're given. Sometimes it's something you have to discover for yourself. And then there's something else that changes, their relationship with time. Because in the real world, things don't respond to urgency. You can't rush a process just because you want a faster result. There are steps that have to be followed, sequences that exist for a reason. And if you skip them, the problem doesn't disappear. It comes back, usually worse than before. So they learn something most people never fully internalize. That progress isn't about speed, it's about precision. They slow down when things get complex. They take the time to understand what's actually happening instead of forcing an outcome. And over time, that builds a kind of patience that's rare in a world built on shortcuts. They become skeptical of anything that promises instant results. Not because they're negative, but because they've seen what reality demands. And once you've learned that lesson through experience, you carry it into everything. And if you trace this back far enough, it usually doesn't start alone. Most men who operate this way were exposed to it early. Not through explanations, but through presence. A father in a garage. An older man who didn't say much but handed over a tool and waited. No lectures. No step-by-step breakdowns. Just silent expectation and time. What was being passed down wasn't just skill. It was a way of approaching problems, a kind of patience, a tolerance for not knowing, a willingness to stay with something until it made sense. And that kind of learning leaves a mark, because the first time a man solves a real problem with his own hands, he doesn't just remember what he fixed. He remembers where he was, who was there, what it felt like when it finally worked. That moment becomes proof. Proof that he can figure things out. Proof that confusion isn't permanent. Proof that effort, if sustained long enough, leads somewhere real. And that's why this kind of competence becomes part of identity. It's not just something he can do, it's something he knows about himself. And after enough of those moments, something fundamental locks into place. He stops seeing outcomes as something random, or something controlled by other people. He starts seeing them as something he can influence, shape, figure out. Because when you've solved enough problems with your own hands, you build a kind of evidence that most people never collect. Evidence that says, if I stay with this long enough, I'll understand it. That belief doesn't come from confidence in the usual sense. It comes from repetition, from failure that didn't end the process, from frustration that eventually turned into clarity. And over time, that builds what psychologists call an internal locus of control. The sense that your life is not something happening to you, but something you can engage with directly. So when something goes wrong, he doesn't immediately look outward for answers. He looks inward first. Not because he has all the answers, but because he trusts that he can find them. So in the end, this was never really about fixing things. It was about building a way of thinking, a way of responding, a way of facing reality that most people never develop. Because the question isn't whether you know how to fix something. The real question is, do you have anything in your life where effort leads to a real result? Where feedback is honest, where you're responsible for the outcome? Because the men who have that carry something into every part of their lives that can't be taught. A quiet confidence, a resistance to panic, a belief that if they stay with a problem long enough, it will give way. And if you've ever felt that shift, you already know. If not, maybe it's time to find something worth struggling with.